Okay, there's two fabulous Maamarim in the Torah Or for Vayigash. I believe we learned the second one last year. Could be we learned this one. I forgot to check, but either way, they're both fabulous Maamarim. Discourses on the Parsha. Let's bring up the text here. Hey Sharna, happy Hanukkah. So tonight, it's always Hanukkah, the final day of Hanukkah. It's a big day. So should be a Melitzoisha for everyone. There should be a Schus, a day of Schusim for everyone. Okay, so this is the first Maamar of Vayigash. It says like this as follows. The pasuk starts off in this week's parsha, Vayigash Elav Yehudah Vayemer Bi'adoni. So this is we're mid situation where Yosef and his Yosef is confronting still as the ruler of Egypt, confronting his brothers and taking Benjamin. So Binyamin. So here Yehudah comes and he approaches Yosef and he says, Bi'adoni. So please, so to say, like he pleads with his master. So the Rebbe says like this. The Alter Rebbe says like this. It says in Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs 1, that Koires Botenu Arazim. It's talking about the house of the Beis HaMikdash, where there was only very little part of wood in the Beis HaMikdash, in the temple. So the Rebbe explains. Hine yesh lahavim, we have to understand, ha'hefresh bein ha'mishkan lebeis ha'lamim. What was the difference we find with the Mishkan, which was the tabernacle that was in the desert and then kind of changed a bit, but was with the Jewish people during the age of the judges until Shlomo Melech built his first Beis HaMikdash, the Beis HaLamim to the temple. Shaha Mishkan, the building of the Mishkan, Hayuma Rozim, the main base or the main foundation of the, so to say, the building of the Mishkan was the wood, was the beams that stood on the floor. That there had to be these atzei shitim, the cedar woods that stood, the krushim, the beams that surrounded, that made up the walls of the Mishkan. What covered it? What made its roof, so to say? It was like a tent. Was the skins of goats, and from rams, and from the tachashim, which was a special animal at the time of the Mishkan. And that's unlike the temple. So where the Mishkan was built, the base, the floor was earth, the walls were wood, were the trees, and the coverings were the skins of animals. So I mean, we have the domim, and we have the tzomech and the chai, all part of the building of the Mishkan, whereas the Beis HaMikdash was all made of stone and earth, specifically. You weren't allowed to make any parts of wood in the Beis HaMikdash, aside literally only in the ceilings they had a little wood, but any kind of porches or any kind of the actual building of the Beis HaMikdash was not allowed to be of wood. It was all supposed to be of stone and earth. In the tikra, on the ceiling, they had some sort of wood structure in there, but that was just a design. It wasn't part of the actual building, so to say, of the Beis HaMikdash. So we see the Beis HaMikdash is made of stone and earth, which is domem, the lifeless, the lowest of the four elements, where the Mishkan is made up of all three of the four elements, which is obviously the fourth is the person, and that's the person who does the service in the temple. But the actual structure of the Mishkan was made up of earth, things that grow, tzomech, which are the trees, and the skins, which is the chai, from the animals. We have to understand. Why was the main part of the structure of the Mishkan made of the wood, made of the beams? And when the earth was only the base, the floor, the mata on the bottom. Ubemigdash in the temple was the opposite. That the main structure was made up of stones and earth. Even the roof was made of stone and earth. They only had the errors into some sort of part of the structure. Did they have a little bit of wood in the Beis HaMikdash? This is totally secondary. The little bit of wood was totally secondary to the structure which was made of stone and earth. So the question is why? The idea is like this. Okay, we've learned this Maamar before. So the idea is like this. It's known. Everything in creation is made up of the four elements, which is domem, tzemeach, chai, u'medaber. Things that are lifeless, like earth and stones. Tzemeach, things that grow, like trees and plants, vegetables. Chai, the livestock, animals, etc. Medaber, people, the people that speak. V'hadoimem hulamata, seemingly, The lowest, the lifeless, the most lifeless of all is the domem, which is the stones in the earth. It's lower than things that grow. And things that grow are lower than the animals, the chai, things that are alive. The highest is the medaber, the one who speaks. Meaning also, it's not just that if we're categorizing them in separate categories and saying this is greater than the next. It's also what happens. Nothing, the domim don't change. It is as is.
One would think that the only reason that the stone would not have burned, burning the temples.
But actually, they did burn. The heat of the Beis HaMikdash was so hot that it did actually burn the stones. Although you wonder how, but that's what happened actually. But that's not the only reason. I mean, and that's the logical reason you could say that stronger structure. But in the elements of things, seemingly the domem it is what it is. It doesn't grow. Tzomeach means things that grow. It starts off small and it grows. So there's more life in vegetation and things that grow because it starts off as a seed and grows into a big tree or to a plant. Animals are obviously more alive than vegetation. Vegetations can't move, really. Where animals are moving around, they're chai, they're alive. A medaber has intellect expressed by speech. So there's more life in a medaber, in someone who speaks, than the earth, and that doesn't have any growth and any seemingly no life in it. So here's Timur. There's a question. The imkain, if based on this, that earth is the lowest because it's earth and stones are the lowest because it's seemingly lifeless. But the end of the day is, where does real growth come from? Is the earth. I mean, the tree itself grows, but where does it grow out of is the earth. Why is it that what comes out of the earth, who controls if something should grow or not, it has to be connected to the earth. So we see the power for things to grow. And there's the power of creating a tree. That's in the earth specifically. How does the vegetation grow and become into existence? Only from the earth. So how is that possible? We just said that the offer itself, the dirt on its own doesn't change. It causes that if you're going to put a seed in, then it's going to cause the power of the growth of the vegetables or of the trees. So meaning to say that the trees are dependent on the earth. If not for the earth, there would be no trees. So how does that work? So this is the famous idea, which we learned many times, that the higher something is, the further it falls. Therefore, specifically, and this is brought down this many times, Malchus is like earth. The power of growth is specifically in the earth. That's why the Seif Maisa, what was the intention in the four worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Tzia, Asiya. Atzilus is like the world of the speech of the human. The world of Bria, of creation, is the world of the Chayas. That's why the angels are in the world of Bria, the world of the animals. Yitzira, the world of formation, is the world of the trees, of the Sameach. And the Asiya is the world of the Domim. But nevertheless, Seif Maisa, Machshav Tchila. Right? What was the real intention? Because the real growth is in this world. Where could you get a mitzvah done? Is specifically in this world. It's all built on the same principle. So the achayin, the idea is like this: the loyri zekari, like the Talmud says many times. You can't compare the two. We're having two different conversations here. Even though, as you look at it, if you analyze the earth itself is lower, more lifeless than the tzameach. Nevertheless, and specifically because of that, Yesh Ma'ali Seder has something specially unique. Mitzat Sharsha, because at its root, it's much greater, and therefore everyone is dependent on the earth. Humans are dependent on the earth for the vegetation, for the animals are dependent on the earth for the vegetation. The vegetations are dependent itself on the earth to grow. So we see so what seems like the lowest, the most lifeless, is really the highest source. It's because it's so high, it falls so low. So it seems to be low, it's really much higher. It's shorish, it's root, it's much higher. Then you do machlekes at the night. The Gemara has the Mishnah has a conversation in Chagiga. Chadam Shemaim Kadmul Aretz, K'mashakasav Bereshis Bara, Es Shemaim Ves Aretz. One opinion is that first comes heaven, then comes earth. Like it says, Bereshis in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, so heaven comes first. But Chadam, and the other opinion is in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, that Eretz Kadma, the earth comes first. Like it says, B'yoyim Asis, when God made Eretz, the earth, V'Shemaim, in heaven. So in one verse, the Torah quotes The opening verse of the Torah quotes heaven first and then earth. And then we have in the second chapter, verse 4, it says, with the day God made earth and then heaven. So which one is it? What comes first, heaven or earth? It's not a question of so we'll see. And both opinions are the word of the living God. Why? Because this is the whole point. Should be machshava in the thought process. Like when a person plans something, there's you're not inspired by most people. Some people take it as a project to build. But most people, if you're building something, you're building for the completion. So the soif ma'aseh, the machshava, the thought, is in the completed product. And therefore, then you say, okay, how do I get to this end? How do I get to this completed project that I want to build or do? There's a process. So the process maybe starts somewhere, but the motivation to even start the process was the end game, was what you're going to complete. So b'machshava, the thought process, eretz kadma, earth was first. It was all about creating the earth. But how do you process it? First comes heaven, then comes earth. The Shemayim. But when he created it, which means the process of things within Seder Shtalshus, means Seder, when we say the chain of creation, it means to say is how things go into how the process of creation works. But it has nothing to do with what motivated creation. On the contrary, it's always the completion that motivates any kind of project. So too with creation. It was this world, the earth, the Olam Asiyah, the world of action, the world of separation, most separated place, a place where you can't find God, is where that's what motivated God to create the whole world even from the beginning, from the first of the first creation, from even the name of God comes from that idea. So Shemachshava Eretz Kamda, but in the thought process, earth comes first, the Shemayim. Ukshabarba, when he created it, Bar Shemayim Tchila, he creates the heaven first, because that's the process. The process and the motivation are not the same thing. Ve'inyan. So what's the idea? So he explains, like I just said, Ki Saif Maisa, the end game, the end of the Maisa of what's going to be is going to happen. B'machshavat Tchila, that's what came up in the thought first. The completion, when you show someone a picture of a house, this is how it's going to look. So then you have to start. Of course, you have to start pouring cement, digging the hole, to pour the cement and to make the foundation. But it's all about the end game, which is the result. Pirshki Aris, the Fishi, Saif Maisa, the earth, which is the end point of everything. But in the root of the thinking, which is, so to say, where the motivation is, the excitement is, that's why we say the highest part, so to say, the manifestation of God is in the crown. And in the crown itself, Keser is Tainug, is pleasure. The pleasure that motivated God. So the pleasure that created the want, then created the structure of creation. That starts with Chachma. It was the end game, which was that this world should exist. So Al-Kain Sharsha, its root is Machshava, Machshava. That was the beginning, that was the thinking process. And it started with a pleasure that what would God get if a person in this world with all the temptations and all the restrictions and all the obstacles, etc., in Golas, living in a place that's godliness, it's so hard to find godliness, is going to stop for a second and say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's what motivated, that pleasure that God gets of that moment is what motivated God to create, starting with the Adam Kadmon, first man, etc., until it comes down to this world, and that's what the pleasure is in the end game. What happens? But in the process, heaven comes first. But in the thought process, they came last. Once you were motivated by the end, okay, so how do we get there? You can't just create a world lifeless. You have to start with the world of Atzilus, and that goes into the chain of creation. From there comes the world of creation, formation, action, etc., until there's the moment where the person stands there and says Shema Yisrael, or gives tzedakah, or puts on tefillin and lights Shabbos candles. This is the rule. The end of the action, is what motivated first the thought process. Therefore, in the process of things, yes, vegetations is higher. There's more life in vegetations. And things that are alive, meaning animals, are higher than the vegetations. That's how things go in the chain of the process of creation. That doimem is the lowest, then comes semeach, which is higher, more life. That's why things grow. Chai is things that are alive. Medaber ba'ilmus in the world, the person speaking. That's the least amount of life seemingly is in the earth. And in the chain of creation, so to say, in the process of creation, Tzameach and Chai come first. Not actually first in in creation actually, because first came the earth, and from the earth came the grass, etc. But in revelation of godliness, of lifeline, of chayis, of vitality. V'hu inyan shemaim kadmul la'aretz. That's the idea of heaven coming before earth. But what is the motivation? Where was the thinking of creation? Hakaduma, hari arts, dafka kadma. Earth comes first. The kulam b'machshava, before anything else. And that's why everything is dependent on it. Why? That's why earth gives off vegetation, and the animals live from the vegetation, and the people live from the animals and the vegetation. Why? Because if not for earth, then nothing would exist. So therefore, the really hidden in earth is the highest level of chayus. It's just not revealed. It's high root. Therefore, at the end of the day, you need earth. Like Sean was saying, it's a stronger structure if it's made out of stone. Animals need to eat vegetation that grows out of the ground. So now the question, so now that we know this foundation, now we understand the difference between the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan, which means to say basically the Mishkan is the way it is from our perspective, that the highest thing is the Medaber, the one who speaks, then goes Chai Tzemech Domim. The Mishkan is the highest level within the process of creation. The Beis HaMikdash was what God really wanted. So so what we see from here is that the Beis HaMikdash was much more. That's why King David said, or King Solomon said, that God didn't find the resting place in creation until the creation of the temple. Because until the building of the temple, we haven't actualized the purpose of creation. Until the point of the building of the temple, it was still a process of creation. But it's hard to say that when we start to live the creation, started really with the building of the Beis HaMikdash. When the Mishkan, when the tabernacle was built, it wasn't at the highest point, like I said. It's still in the process. It wasn't the Tachlis HaShleimus. It wasn't the completion of the way things were. That was God's temporary home. I'm living in the caravan until my house is built. God was saying, so to say, that I've been traveling in a tent. I was traveling in the desert from place to place. That was my home. Then I went to Shiloh, and Shiloh was a kind of a temporary place also. It wasn't such a fantastic building. And then he went to Givon and all the other places that the Mishkan travels from place to place. And because it wasn't permanent, it went along with the way the system of creation was, the process of creation, which is where you look at heaven first and then earth. So therefore, in that process, of course, only the floor is earth, but on top of that comes the trees, which were the beams that made the walls of the Mishkan. On top of that came the skins, come from the animals. And that's also why the places of the temple, of the tabernacle, are not considered a Makom Kodesh, especially not like Yerushalayim. Once Shlomo Melech built the foundations of the Beis HaMikdash, it became the Beis HaMikdash became exact. It had to be in the Makom, the place. What does Yaakov Avinu say? This is the Makom, this is the place. It doesn't become the Makom, the place, until he built the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, when they came to build the second Beis HaMikdash, they had to know exactly where to build the Mizbeach. That kind of condition you didn't have in the Mishkan. Even though the Mishkan was in Shiloh for 300 years. And I know for instance, a lot of people from the Christian community and other faiths that believe in the Bible, they give a lot of attention to Shiloh. When Shiloh was a special place. For 300 years, the Mishkan stood there. But it's not Jerusalem, it's not the temple. And therefore, when they had to build the Mizbeach on the second Beis HaMikdash, they had to have the prophets and the elders who knew exactly where the Mizbeach was, where the altar was in the times of Shlomo Melech, because it's all about the place now. Therefore, in the temple, Mishkan, the walls, Shayu Mikrashim, they were built of the beams. Shayu Bechin Sameach, the beams are made of wood, which are things that grow. Rakarka Mishkan, only the bottom, the floor, was made of earth, because here we're looking at the process of creation. The highest thing is the roof, which is the skins, then the walls, and then the earth. This way things are in the chain of creation. The things that grow are higher than the earth, than lifeless things. And therefore it wasn't any kind of tree that they made the beams from, but they made them from an arazim, the eris tree. The very high trees, very high beams. These are the highest level of means the high. It could have taken small wood and put together boards. No, they use these huge beams. Although if you look at an Eris tree, I think online, they're not such big trees, but I'm not sure. Not going to get to go there. But she bechinas ayonish b'tzameach. Much greater than lifeless things. It means when you're taking something of vegetations, you're going to take a powerful, great tree. Tzadika tamar yifrach. Right? There's huge, great trees. Shein by taisus a gidu much higher than the earth. That doesn't have that. The earth itself doesn't grow. Okay, you have to remember the earth causes growth, but it itself doesn't grow. And the higher than the beams themselves were the coverings of the Mishkan. They came from the skins of the Oires, Elim, Tchashim, from the different animals. Shubechinas Chai, which is the life, which is life is higher than the vegetation. Shlomai Mader Gam Mechinas Hatzemeach, which is higher than the vegetation. Therefore, Hamakifim. And therefore, we're going to learn in the Maamar, in the discourses, when we talk about the Mishkan in more detail, we recognize that there's the concept of the coverings have a great idea, which is the idea of makif, which brings the encompassing energy. Mishkan, that they were hanging over the walls of the Mishkan. They're on a higher level, and therefore they're from a higher level of creation, which is from animals versus wood, which is from vegetation. Which is greater than things that grow. The kaisel, the walls are lower than the coverings. Nimsa, from here we see, the Mishkan was built according to the system of creation, according to the process of creation, that heaven comes before earth. How things are looked from above down. We say the heaven comes first. So that's how the Mishkan, that's how the tabernacle was created. But the temple, so what he's saying before is, so why was the Mishkan built in such a way of wood, skins, and earth, and only on the bottom? It was because it wasn't it wasn't the highest level. It was temporary. It was God's temporary home. And therefore it didn't permeate the place, the makom, the place. And it's still not tachlis hashleimus, not the completion of how God wanted things to be. But the Beis HaMikdash is the mamish, the way, the completion of creation. Thing we're at its mamish completion. Shleimus means completion. That was not the temporary resting place for Hashem. That's the permanent resting place for Hashem. Shakadosh Baruch Hu. This is my resting place forever. And therefore, there's no the temple today, the Maamar Vayigash is holy till today. It's holy for Jews. This is the place of the temple. Now, notwithstanding if the temple self-standing, because it showed the earth, which is the main part of the Beis HaMikdash, is still there, and that's the Maamar Vayigash. That's the place of the temple. The temple was like in the world to come. How things are going to be in the 7,000th year, where there's going to be tranquility and peace for all times. And then it's going to have the machshava, the thinking process, where we're going to see the elevation of earth. So then in creation, for instance, like this, there's one of the rules is Eshes Chayil Teres Baila. Eshes Chayil means that the woman is going to be a terrace, is going to be like a crown over her husband. What does that mean? So all these Maamarim go into this idea that when Mashiach comes, the idea that for instance, that in today's tradition, the woman doesn't respond to the husband, that's to say they're shalshless. The man's the mashpia, the woman's the makabel, the husband has a hariyat mekudeshesli. The woman's quiet in Jewish tradition. But in the times of Mashiach, and speak kol chas and kol kala, there's going to be the voice of the kala, of the woman. And that's the idea of Eshes Chayil Teres Baila. That's the idea of malchus. Malchus meaning kingship, royalty, is only receiving from the other midas, from the other attributes. It has nothing of its own. It's like that's why the Jewish people compared to the moon, which is only a reflection of the light of the sun. But when Mashiach comes, the malchus, which seemingly royalty, which is only a receptacle of the other midas, the highest thing. And that's why we see this also in the quality of royalty today. That's why David, this is what the whole Maamar is getting to. Who's greater, David or Yosef? Yehudah or Yosef? Yehudah represents the completion of the machshava, of the thought process. Yosef is the highest level of how the Seder Shtalshlos. In the chain of things, Yosef is the highest. But in the real thought of the process, it's all about Yehudah. It's all about David. It's all about Mashiach. It's all about Malchus. Because there's a royalty, seemingly, what's royalty? Everything, the king has nothing of his own. Everything, even the characters coming from different parts of the king's character, but doesn't necessarily mean that the person's royal. You have a lot of smart people, a lot of talented people, doesn't mean you're royal. The royalty, so to say, is a receptacle of everything. But it is everything, because you could have a person that has all the talents, but couldn't be king for a second, not he or she. It is there's like the Uretz. There's something about royalty. You can't put your finger on it, but it's everything. And that's the idea and that's going to be revealed when Mashiach comes. The Islamayim Mikulm, you're going to see how the royalty, the Malchus, is higher than everything. Yehudah is going to be higher than Yosef. Meshakosef, Eishes Chayil, the woman is Ateres Baal, is the crown of her husband. Higher than the husband. Shetiya, the crown sits on top of the head. Shetiya, Ateres La'asad Lavi, Mashiach comes, it's going to be an Ateres, it's going to be a crown for Zav, for the Midos. Today, the Midos, right? If you want to say, what's the super character? Avram Avinu's Chesed, Yaakov is Tiferes, beauty, Yitzchak is Gevura, power, severity. You have Yosef as Yisod, the culmination of it all in action. You have Netzach and Yehod. These are all the attributes. There's character there. There's personality there. Malchus only receives from it. But when Mashiach comes, you're going to see that there's the quality of royalty that's everything. David is everything. David Avdi Nasi Lem La'olam. That's what it says in this week's Haftorah. David is the king. Because in the thought process, Malchus, kingship, royalty, that was what comes into the thought process first, much higher than all the other characteristics of the Midos of Chesed, the Gvura, Teferes. And therefore, in the temple, that's how it was. It's the way it was. It's the way it's going to be when Mashiach comes in the world to come. Therefore, specifically, the Beis HaMikdash was built of the things that seemingly are lifeless, like stones and earth. Even the roof, even the encompassing the roof and the roof parts were made of stones and earth. And we didn't put in any of any wood. Shehu kifi mashi laslav is like Mashiach comes, which is eretz come there where earth. The earth it comes before the heavens. Eishes Chayil, the woman is Ateres Baal, is the crown of her husband. Mitzat Sharsha, the way it is in the root. Rak, only thing was shekloin sa'is shel eres shahi b'tikra. There's certain parts, kind of designs of wood that were in the roof. Heim hayu b'chinas tamchin. There's the idea, and the Rebbe says tamchin deraisa. That's like the people who support the Torah learning. So there's the Torah learning. There's people who support the Torah learning. So the wood represents the tamchin deraisa, the people who support the Torah learning. V'hinei, the Rebbe continues, nira ba'alil gamkein v'chinazu. So the Rebbe says, "V'hinei nira ba'alil gamkein v'chinazu sheish ba'aretz ma'ali seira v'hu." We see something that's also very unique about earth. And what is this? V'hu b'chinas bittul. In Avodah, the earth represents the concept of bittul, self-nullification. Sheish ba, that there's an earth. She midras tachas kapas ragla. Imagine, right? The earth agreed willingly to become trampled on everyone, animals, everyone walks on earth, people. You can't climb me. The trees are all about one side. It's not bittul. The whole idea of vegetation is look how tall of a tree I am. I'm a huge cedar tree. Right? The earth is, so the whole point of the difference between vegetation and earth is the mamish opposite. The earth is all about bittul, self-nullification. Everyone could step on it. And the tree is all about showing how high it grows. And again, why is there such a bittul in earth? Why is there such a self-nullification in earth? Because the closer you get to the essence, the less you have self-awareness. It's not about you. Bittul comes from a high level, not a low level. You're not humble. Humility and self-nullification is not because you have a low self-esteem. On the contrary, you're so focused and so clear of what should be that your ego doesn't get in your way. And because it's shorish, because its root is in the thinking process, it's closer to the essence, it has no problem to be the stepping ground of all creation. Because in machshav we have, the word machshav is rooted in the ideas of chashav ma, the idea of thinking what? I'm what? I'm nothing. In the machshav, in the thinking process, it's so close to the essence that it's not about you. Moshe Rabbeinu, the most humble of people, said, "V'nachnu ma, we are what? What means bittul, self-nullification. And because the earth is higher in the thinking process, therefore it's connected to bittul. And because of that, bittul, self-nullification, that's why it's going to be the crown over the husband. Therefore, God wanted the temple specifically. His resting home, his permanent home, should be bittul, because bittul, but the more any place where there's ego, where there's yesh, it's contrary to godliness. So where does godliness want to be? In the greatest receptacle of godliness, which is bittul. Ein kli male machzik bracha. You can't be full of yourself, and if you're full glass, you can't handle anything else. You're full of yourself. How do you have space for blessing? Mashenkim Mishkan. That's the Beis HaMikdash. The Mikdash was shining the highest level of bittul, self-nullification. Therefore, specifically, the temple was built out of stones. Mashenkim Mishkan. Shenasik if you say the shtalshus, but say the shtalshus. The achshav shebechinas tzemeach l'mayla madayim. Here we look at it from the perspective of the process of creation, and there the tzemeach says, "Look how tall v'tree I am," and that's the way it is. Because the further you go away from the thinking process, God created a world, and the world is that there's higher and lower. Shemayim kadmu, when heaven comes before earth. And therefore the trees were were the main structure of the Mishkan. And therefore, like we said before, the earth was only on the bottom. Now we're going to understand this is the meeting of Yehudah and Yosef. It's not ego negative. It's also ego positive. It's a healthy ego, right? So there's the ego, the way you see things in Seder Shtashos, in the chain of creation, in the process of creation, it is like that. The medaber is higher than the chai. The people that speak have intellect are greater than, so to say, the animals. And the animals are greater than the vegetation. The vegetation is greater than the stones. That is the truth. And also in Avodah. There's the moach, the mind, which is represented by the medaber. You have the midos, the feeling, the emotions, that's represented by the chai. You have the tzameach, which is also part of the midos on the lower level. And then you have the offer, which is the malchus, which is bittul. So in accomplishing things from the perspective of the process of creation, the mind is the highest. You could achieve much. I mean, when you have to measure something about a qualification of a person, not always, but a lot of the time, you can look at how smart the person is, because then what could you accomplish? What makes you special is in your brain. So therefore, it's not so simple to say Yehudah is greater than Yosef, and therefore they meet in this week's parsha and they have it out. Yosef Yehudah. This is the conversation. How are we looking at things from the perspective of the thought process, or the perspective of how things come into being, into Seder Shtashos, in the process of things. Yosef Yehudah. They represent, Yosef is the tree, it's Yosef a tzaddik a tamar, and Yehudah is the word haidah, acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is bittul. In avoda, this is the difference between Shema Yisrael, the Shema and Shmon Esrei. Shema Yisrael is all about the powerful of the mind and the heart. V'hafteis Hashem lekecha, the burning power of the love you have for God. That's all Yosef. Yehudah is the silent Shemon Esrei, called the Mamadaka, standing there like a servant in front of God. Two different avodas, two different ways of serving God. And they meet in this week's parsha. Ki Yosef, the word Yosef is from the word toisefes, to add, like a tree adds in growth. V'riboy. Like the tree grows larger, so too the idea of Yosef is to grow in your Avodas Hashem. The idea of vegetation. Erez, specifically the cedar. How high you could grow. Like the cedar trees in Lebanon. That's in the Midos, in the world of Atzilus. That's considered things that grow compared to royalty, which is seemingly lifeless, has nothing of its own. As explained in other places more at length. For instance, in the motions grow. You get more passion for Hashem, more love for Hashem, more yira, more fear of Hashem. Where the domem, the lifeless, which is represented in Malchus, is like the letters. Letters don't grow. Words and letters don't grow. They form ideas. You could enclose ideas in them. But we know that in the root, and Chassidus explains all the time, the oisiyos are so high and so deep in the origin of creation. And that's why you don't have to think how to formulate the words. because your soul is so connected to the letters. But seemingly letters are lifeless. Letters are helpless to how you're going to form them. They have no control of how the person is going to form their words. A person could say angry, hateful things. A person could say loving, kind things. The letters have no choice. How you decide to formulate and put the words together and the tone you put into the words is how it's going to be communicated. But you can't communicate without the letters. So the letters is like the domain, the stones, but the tzaddik, the eras, the tree, is the emotions. And that's all the energy that you put into the words. And there's different types of emotions. You can have small emotions, and you can have great emotions. And that's why we find in the Chukkah, when it comes to the Paraduma, we put in the smallest tree and the largest tree, Erez and Ezav. She'ezav hu b'chinas katan, the Ezav tree is the smallest, and the Erez is the Gadlus, is the largest. When it comes to the tzaddik is the great person. The tzaddik, he or she is not like the Ezav, the small vegetation, but like the Erez, the cedar tree in Lebanon. The Yosef Bifrat. And of all tzaddikim, who's the great tzaddik? Is Yosef, which is b'chinas Yisod. Of all the midas, he's the power of communication of Kesher, Yisod, the foundation. We know that the Yisod is connected all the way to the highest point of the brain. But Das Keser. And Das, which is the meeting point of Chesed and Gevura, goes all the way up to the crown. And this is why it's called the Erez. Yosef Tzaddik is strength and growth of everything together, of the character of the person. So that's Yosef. What's Yehudah? He's the earth, he's the earth. Malchus, royalty, Atzilus, of the world of Atzilus, seemingly has nothing of its own. She bechinas adaimim, like the letters, like the lifeless stones of Atzilus. Therefore, Yehudah is not the tree that grows great and large, but his word, rooted in his name, is the word of acknowledgement, humility, bittul, self-nullification. The highest level of self-nullification is, like we said before, is in the lifeless things. So therefore, in Seder Shtalshalos, when they meet, from the perspective of the chain of the creation, Yosef's greater. He's the great tree. Is Ata Yosef Ulamayim Yehudah. Today, Yosef is greater than Yehudah. Malchus Shifa v'chiyusa minazah. Malchus royalty only can take what's made up on the inside, what's the characters, what's the midos, the zah, the zerampin, the small complexion, which is all the midos, the 6 midos. Leah's 6 children. When it comes to Egypt, Yosef is the king, the way things are in the chain of creation. Growing, salvation. He provided everyone during the famine. He gives to everyone. Yehudah himself has to receive from Yosef. And that's why he says, Vayigash Yehudah. Yehudah approaches Yosef. And he says, Bi Adoni, please. Yehudah has to say, please, master, give me. Because Yehudah needs to receive from Yosef. He's asking that Yosef, the great righteous Yosef, should give to him, because Malchus has to receive. Malchus has nothing of its own. The woman stands quiet. Like the Zohar says, Vayigash, Hainu Tikroiva Alma Balma. This is the meeting of the worlds. The Hainu Alma Tata, the lower world. Bechinas Malchus, the way things are in the world of, in perspective of royalty. Eretz, earth. Misachedis Negeshes tries to come one and approach Alma Deilah, the higher world, which is represented by Yosef. Bechinas Zal, the Kabbalah Shefa, to get from the Midos. Give me from your love. Give me from your passion. Give me from your Yira, great Yira. All the emotions, the growth of Yosef, the great tree. Yehudah says, I'm only a receptacle of that. Mishkan. That's the way things were in the time of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. That the Tzemech was higher than the Domim. The tree stood on top of the earth. Avalasa Lavi, Mashiach comes. Isali Yehudah Malim Yosef. Then Yehudah is going to be greater than Yosef. It says, Eishes Chayil Teres Vaila. The woman becomes the crown of the husband. Because, like I said before, Yosef, Yehudah is the earth, is in the original thought. The original thought is the bittul, the nullification, the haidah, the acknowledgement. That's why specifically in Shema Yisrael, besides in Vahayim Shemaya, we were just talking about the fear, but the Shema Yisrael is all about the love and awe of Hashem. Hero is Hashem is one, Yichud, and in the Amidah we talk about our needs. Rifeinu, Baruch Aleinu, Shma Koleinu, Why? Because in the highest point is where everything is. The whole purpose is the creation. Your needs is not a secondary thing, because you have that in your needs is the essence of creation. When Mashiach comes, it's all going to be revealed. Because in the thinking process, Yehudah comes first, Bittul comes first, Eretz comes first. The Bittul. The highest level of self-nullification, the way the power of what? And he says, Vine, Abba Yisad Brata. That says, like he quotes over here, that Abba, which is Chachma, Yosef Abbas creates the daughter, which is Malchus. Which means, Ki Chachma Ilah Nikar Yira Ilah. Chachma, the higher level of God's wisdom, is the great fear. The Chachma Tata, and the lower level of wisdom, is Malchus. We know that the rule is that there's higher love, higher fear, lower fear. That's represented in the four letters of Hashem's name. Yud is the highest fear, then comes Yud is the Hey is the highest love, Vav is the lower love, and the second Hey is the world of Malchus, the world of action. That's the lower fear. Now, seemingly low fear is like the fear of punishment, fear of disconnect, not of awe of Hashem. So, but that's the same idea, but the top and the bottom meet together. That Chachma Ilah, God's great fear, Yirei Ilah, and Chachma Tata, which is Yirei Tata, Abi Yasad Brata, that in the father is the daughter. In the highest level is where the lowest level is. Because of how high you are, it shows itself in the bottom line, the fear of disconnect, the fear of punishment. And Mashiach comes, that's going to reconnect the higher fear and the lower fear in its source. That's what it means, that a crown over the husband. Because the husband, which represents the mind and the mind that creates the emotions, the love and fear of the emotions of the person, it's all that's nice. But the bittul is the self-nullification. It's not about you. That's why it's all the ma'isa ikr. It's all about getting the job done. So nice you have love and fear, but what's with the ma'isa? What's with the action? The midas and the emotions, the torso of the person. That's nice, but the ikr is the ma'isa b'poil. There's the bittles, the self-nullification. And that's why the earth is ready to be the walking ground for everyone. And Moshe, which is not the self-nullification of nothingness, but it comes from the highest level of fear. And because he's so aware of godliness, he brings an absolute bittul. So too in the earth, where the person seemingly feels like just earth, but rooted in that is that you feel that you recognize that there's nothing greater than Hashem. Therefore, this absolute level of bittul. That's why in the Haftarah that's going to talk about the days of Mashiach, says God tells the prophet, take a wood, Yehudah, write on it for the tribe of Yehudah. And take another piece of wood, Yosef, write on it on behalf of Yosef, Ephraim, which is the son of Yosef, which represents the 10 tribes. And bring them the two branches together. And he says, what's the idea? What's the message in this? That God says, I'm going to take the tree of Yosef and put it together with the tree of Yehudah. But who's going to be the king? But David's going to be king. Yehudah, when Mashiach comes, you're going to see that even though in the times of the first temple, 10 tribes went with Yosef. Right? Ephraim was Yosef. Yeravam and Nevat, like we learned in Sanhedrin, is Yosef. Yehudah had the smaller part, the Yerushalayim, the kingdom of David. But Mashiach comes, Va'avdi David Melchalem. There's going to be a reunification of the tribes, but who's going to be the king is going to be David. The way things are in this world now, from the perspective of the process of creation, of Seder Shtalshlis, Yosef, the great tree, the emotions, the Ava, the year, the love, the growth, that's greater than Yehudah, the bittul, the self-nullification. Shenimshal Erez, Yosef is like the cedar tree, Asher Goda that grows, Begoiva, Mitaisif, Hailach, higher and higher. Kach Yosef, Elav, Shaichem, Aseres, Shratim. That's why the 10 tribes went with Yosef. Meshakasav, Vishifta, Yisrael, V'chaveirav. The tribes of Israel. Nimtzahu Meruba, Bishvatim, Yosef and Yehudah. The northern kingdom was much greater in numbers and power pretty much throughout the time of the first temple than the tribe of Yehudah. He's the great intellect, the great everything, all the emotions and the intellect is running full force. Ach la'aselav when Mashiach comes. When everything is going to come back together. Yosef and Yehudah is going to be reunited. That meeting that takes place in this week's parsha is going to happen again with the coming of Mashiach. Absolute oneness. The Maamar Vayigash Yehudah symbolized today in the parsha that Yehudah comes and approaches Yosef. Echad be'echad yigashu, they're going to approach each other together. Mashiach comes. Then we're going to see how Yehudah, the acknowledgement, bittul, eretz, earth, comes before heaven. The woman is the crown of the husband. Therefore, God says in the prophecy, yes, there's going to be a reunification. But then va'avdi David Melech, David is going to be the king. I'll call Yisrael and all the Jewish people. Therefore, it says in this week's parsha, Yosef couldn't hold himself back. When he acknowledged and when he revealed who he was to his brothers. Therefore, Yosef fell apart. Why did Yosef fall apart when he recognizes and he admits who he is to his brothers? Because in that moment there was a spark of geula, of redemption, and at that moment he was overwhelmed with the greatness of Yehudah. The Rebbe finishes off the Maamar this beautiful idea. Now, based on this, Yuvin Mashig Kasib Likutei Shas. We'll understand what we learned in our Sanhedrin class. It's brought down from the Arizal, but it says in the Gemara Chelek, Daf Kuf Beis Seva Amud Aleph, Shetavsa Kadosh Baruch Hu Yeravim ben Nevat. God, so to say, grabbed Yeravim, the son of Nevat, who was the first king of Israel, like we learned from the tribe of Ephraim, of Yosef. V'amar lechazar b'cha, do tshuva. Amar lai, so he said, Mi b'rosh. Who's going to be the king? Who's going to go first? I'm ready to do tshuva. But if I'm together with David, Amelech, who walks first? So God tells Yeravim and Nevat ben Yishai b'rosh. David goes first, son of Yishai. Amar lai yihaki lai beina. He says, if that's the case, I don't want to do tshuva. I'm not going to do tshuva if Yehudah goes first, if David goes first. The son of Yishai goes first. That's the idea. God wanted Yeravim, which represented a corrupt version of Yosef. Because when you have ego, if that goes corrupt, he wasn't ready to acknowledge. He wasn't ready to change his character. He says, I'll do tshuva, I'll come like my forefather Yosef. But I have to still be in charge. I have to go first. So God says to Yeravim, Mechazar, do tshuva. And then you'll have Yosef in you. It's Ephraim, the tree of Ephraim, which is the Yeravim and Nevat. I mean, he was like we learned, he was a huge tzaddik. He learned things that no one ever learned before. From Achia Shalom, he was great. Yeravim and Nevat was the biggest disappointment in history. And if he would have just done tshuva, he would have from his great grandfather Yosef. And God said, if you just do tshuva, me, you, and the son of Yishai are going to walk together in the Garden of Eden. You're going to see the essence of godliness. He offered him full, complete forgiveness, atonement. And together we're going to walk together. Though he corrupted, he brought down the whole Jewish people. And God said, if you do tshuva, we're going to walk together in Gan Eden, you, me, and the son of Yishai. But he said, Mi b'rosh, who goes first? He's ready to do tshuva, but only on condition that he's first. That's Yosef is the one who's in charge. He's only ready to do tshuva if it's going to be as it was, that Yosef is over Yehudah. He wanted to be before David. God tells him, it's not going to be like that when Mashiach comes. Yehudah, ben Yishai b'rosh, the son of Yishai goes first. If that's the case, I'm not ready. Because Yosef's character is about growth. He doesn't have the root of bittul, self-nullification. And even though in Yosef it was a great tzaddik, but in a corrupted version of Yosef, it comes to Yeravim ben Nevat, and he's not ready to even reconnect to his ancestor of Yosef if it means he's not first. He doesn't have rooted in him the concept of bittul, the shiftless and the humility. And that this is what the Gemara says, that what brought him down was his ego. The ego, which is a positive ego, is Yosef a tzaddik. But when that goes wrong, is Yeravim ben Nevat. That was also similar, the same problem with the spies. Eretz Yisrael represented bittul. They said, we don't want to go to the land. We don't want self-nullification. We want to serve God in a projected way. We want to have full love, full ava, full yira. We don't want the humility that comes with the land. They thought they didn't need the humility. They had this great masculine power. The Torah says about them. They were all great men. Notwithstanding of what Yeravim wanted, and notwithstanding what the spies wanted, Mashiach comes, and hopefully speedily in our time, Yosef and Yehudah are going to be reunited. And it's going to be the way of Avdi, David, Nasi Aleim, Leheve, Echad Bechad, they're going to be absolutely one in the way that Yosef is going to be secondary. Yosef is going to be secondary to David. David's going to be Berosh. That's why the prophecy ends in this week's Haftarah of David, Avdi, Nasi Aleim, Lailam. I want to wish everyone again a very, very happy Zos Chanukah. Thank you for joining. Hope everyone had a wonderful Chanukah. Good Chodesh. See you all Beis Hashem next class. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.